Welcome to episode 18 of Michael McCoy's Garden. The 30th of April 1998. The first frost has come and the party has very definitely been pooped. The consequent hangover is as painful as the party was wild. Instead of just being prostrate, the leaves of the nasturtiums insist on hanging, all brownish. Those near the house or under the eaves are still looking okay, but are no longer having any fun. Ipomoea lobata has left its run far too late. It was acting as if it had all the time in the world and was just leaving the pole set up for it and leaning out towards a nearby apple tree when the weather turned. It's now in a panic to flower. The flowers are a very showy red-orange, fading to yellow, but they're not so showy against foliage that is as yellow as the flowers. I was sympathetic until I saw the plants in a friend's garden last week smothering brush fencing in a wall of blooms. I'd have torn mine up by the roots after that if it hadn't been too cold to go into the garden. Along with the cold, which has been turned on as if by a switch, I like to imagine that the resting state is one of balmy warmth, has come some rain. Still nowhere near enough to wet the soil to any depth, but it has got me planting, even if I must water the new stuff occasionally. In went the much coveted Euphorbia martinii, which has the blue foliage of one parent, Euphorbia coraceus, and the red stems and some red floral parts of Euphorbia amygdaloides purpurea. And in went the hair-like Stipa tenuissima, since removed due to quarantine restrictions. I've longed for these things for ages, and though it's nice to have been given them, not yet commercially available, you see, I'm immediately greedy to have a patch or a sweep of them. So many plants look like nothing if planted alone. In went more bulbs. Nothing showy like tulips, but little incidents that don't take up any lateral space and are happy to shoot up and sparkle amongst other low plants. Things like Brodia, also known as Queen Fabiola, though as a common name or as a varietal name, I'm not sure. It flowers in a good rich shade of blue from a stem that has multiple branches from one point, like a very open agapanthus. It tends to lie about on the ground, or if standing, is very low, and the flowers are borne on such slender stems that they look like that they've just been thrown loose into whatever ground cover they're amongst. The so-called yellow Brodia, actually Bloomeria, why do the bulb firms have to treat us like idiots? Does likewise, though the flowers are smaller. It is in bloom for ages, and with its spherical flower head, with all the fine flower stems arising from one point on the main stem, it looks like a miniature fireworks display. Many of the alliums, flowering onions, are good for planting among other herbaceous perennial plants. Their foliage season is earlier than most of the perennials, and by the time their neighbours are taking up any space, their leaves are dying off. This is also when they flower. A few species are finally appearing in bulb catalogues, though they're still relatively expensive. The only one I could afford, since I insist on multiples, was the drumstick allium, Allium Sphericephalon. This is one of the last to flower in early summer and is also one of the smaller in the size of its flower head, but in a really decent clump is a lovely incident. It's also, I'm told, the only one of the more showy species that will succeed in parts of the country without a decent winter chill. So at this point, my garden was just showing the first signs of the really cold temperatures that we get here in Wood End, and was also showing something of the weakness of my planting plan. And it was a weakness I was very well aware of, that in order to try and achieve this massive kind of summer explosion in a short space of time, that the offsetting cost of that was going to be a reasonably weak winter effect. And it is an inevitability that my belief is really that the higher that you reach at one time of year for a really extreme explosion and of volume and flower, the more you'll pay for it at some other time of year. But it's a price I'm prepared to pay. I'd much rather have really dramatic seasonal variation than 12 months of mediocrity myself. But tomorrow is the first day of winter, so join me to find out just what really happened in that, just how far it fell from its incredible heights of summer. See you tomorrow.